The morning after Blaise Alexander died while racing for an ARCA win at Charlotte, a longtime member of the NASCAR press corps walked into the track's infield media center and proceeded to hold court for one and all to hear. The guy was a self-appointed expert in all things: racing safety, masterminding a sanctioning body, you name it. The past 17 months didn't seem to be any kind of tragedy. This was just another juicy and sensational story to cover. If it bleeds, it leads. And better yet, sells newspapers. There was no stopping him. Old Billy Francis killed another one, he bellowed. Personally, I'd never spoken a single word to him. And rest assured, he had no idea who I was. Sitting across the room, and before I was even aware of what I was doing, I started screaming at him to shut his bleeping mouth. The room, already full of media, got very quiet. I've taught Sunday school, been a deacon, done more Bible studies based on the Andy Griffith Show than I can possibly count. But there I was, trying my best to cross all of George Carlin's 7 dirty words off my list. Put it this way, I had myself an all-out nutty right there in the middle of the Charlotte Motor Speedway Media Center. Honestly, I don't remember how it all ended. We'd been bellowing at each other from across the room, so it wasn't like we had to be physically separated. A member of NASCAR's public relations department walked with me out of the building as I tried to settle down. He patted me on the back and said, so no one else could hear him, "You're right. He is an asshole." 5 drivers were dead. Their losses impacted many people in many different ways. Chaos and innuendo reigned supreme in and around NASCAR. On top of that, the shock of 9/11 still hung thick in the air. The U.S.-led invasion of Afghanistan began that weekend. I will not attempt to justify my behavior that day. All these years later, it remains the most unprofessional moment of my career. What I will say is this: it was a bleak time in NASCAR. There were a lot of people on edge in the garage and in the grandstands. And in that moment, I let the pressure get the best of me. Not long before the start of the October 4th, 2001 ARCA race at Charlotte, one of Alexander's best friends qualified for the first Winston Cup start of his career. His name, Jimmie Johnson. As friends sometimes have a habit of doing, Alexander and Johnson had enjoyed ragging on each other, and yes, maybe even flipping each other the bird out on the racetrack. Just before engines fired for the ARCA event, something told Johnson to go wish his buddy well.
Yeah, I was so happy, to qualify how we did in our cup effort, and standing around, hanging out with the Lowe's people talking about how great we did, and I just felt this sense of urgency to run out and wish them luck, and just real happy that I was able to run out, and engines were running. We got a quick handshake from him, got to see him smile one last time, and it's amazing. In a blink of an eye, someone can be gone, and it's hard to realize that stuff until someone close to you is gone. And with all the tragedy this whole country's seen, including the deaths in motorsports, and you gotta live every day to the fullest, and appreciate everyone around you. Just went out to wish them luck, just like you do, any other time, and didn't know he wouldn't come back.
The day after the race, right about the time I was going berserk in the media center, PRN veteran Steve Richards sought Johnson out in the garage for a comment.
Blaise, I don't know, I've got my strong moments right now. I'm feeling strong where I can talk about it, but he's just such a neat person, and I'm so glad so many people got to know him and see what he was about. Very happy, kind, giving person, and kind of went down like a warrior, racing for the win if there's any peace in that, but I just a terrible deal, violent wreck, and one of my closest friends here is gone, and it's just really sad.
Alexander had experienced the loss of his friend Kenny Irwin the year before to a racing accident, but still, he was not wearing any kind of head and neck restraint device at the time of his accident.
We kidded around about, I saw his car on Wednesday, and I didn't care for, the safety precautions he had taken. It was outdated stuff, and he knew of all the latest stuff to apply, and but just like all of us, it's just hard to find the time to put that stuff into place, and it's so sad that he's not here anymore.
Jimmie Johnson, of course, went on to become a 7-time NASCAR champion duplicating the feat first set by Richard Petty and then Dale Earnhardt. Throughout his career, Johnson's cars carried a decal honoring his late friend, placed on the nose of the machine so Blaise Alexander would always get to the finish line first. That last meeting on pit road at Charlotte. Two friends, two wildly different outcomes. Life and death can be strange at times. Blaise Alexander Jr. was known as both Little B and by the initials BR for Blaise Robert. He was the youngster in school who was always trying to get classmates laughing, always into something, always on the move. Here's Big B, Blaise Alexander Sr.
Blaise was a prankster. He was always, like the comical kid in the class. He was always the guy got in a little bit of trouble on a basketball team, and he was a mischievous guy, but not a bad kid.
The Alexanders became fast friends with Sonny Bussey, who began fielding a go-kart for the youngster. Little B was bitten by the racing bug, and bitten hard.
He took to the go-karts like crazy. That was a really good thing. And Sonny and he were just best of friends, and we bought a small trailer, and Sonny had a van, and they took off. And they were, next thing you know, they were gone every single weekend. And it was, I would drive to meet him or try and fly somewhere to meet them, like in upstate New York or somewhere around Pennsylvania, wherever we had to go, and meet him on a Sunday morning, watch him race, and zoom home. I had a little single engine airplane, so it was it was a great Sunday for me.
Sonny called the Alexanders one night and said they weren't going to be able to race the next day, but he went to the track anyway. That night, he died of a heart attack. Little B's racing career was over, at least for the time being.
That was like the end of Blaise's career. He sold the go-karts, he sold the trailer, he was heartbroken. I think he was 14 maybe at the time.
Not long afterward, the Alexanders were in a body shop where a friend's micro sprint car was being painted. The machine caught Little B's attention. What's that? His son's curiosity piqued. Big B took Little B to see the friend race that micro sprint, and sure enough, the next thing Big B knew, they had a micro sprint of their own. Next came a late model stock car and a move to North Carolina after graduating from school in his native Pennsylvania. Edging up the ladder to ARCA, Little B ran 5 races in that division in 1995 and the full 25-race schedule the following season. There were flashes of brilliance that year, including a second-place finish at Charlotte that May.
It was kind of a, it was a ragged team at best, but they put some cars together. A couple of young guys went down with them from Montoursville, and every now and then we'd have to put some money up to buy a motor, but other than that, it was just good old ARCA racing.
Blaise Jr. was good enough that year to win Rookie of the Year honors for the ARCA division. When it came time for his speech at the year-end banquet, Little B was in rare form.
One of the funny highlights of his ARCA racing was after the first year, he was the Rookie of the Year. And he went up and spoke, and he roasted everybody in ARCA. I mean, all the officials, all the guys who owned the ARCA stuff. He just roasted them, and it was funny. It was full of laughs. I have that tape yet. I think I have it somewhere, and it was kind of a hilarious tape. Anyway, that was kind of the way he was. Everybody else went up and talked for 20 minutes about racing, and he went up and talked about people. I just thought that was his nature. That was just the way he was.
The young racer was on his way up the ladder. Fellow Pennsylvanian Jimmy Spencer fielded a car for young Alexander in a couple of races near the end of the 1997 Busch Series season. Rockingham was an older, tough, and abrasive racetrack, with a layout that was challenging even on the best days. Little B went there for the first time and qualified a respectable 6th. After an adventurous day, Blaise Jr. brought the car home in 24th place, 1 lap down to race winner Mark Martin.
He finished that race. But when he brought the car back, Jimmy Spencer was at the trailer. Of course, it was his equipment in his trailer. But he said, Blaise, he said, you're a heck of a racer. He said, but there's not a straight panel in this car. There was not a straight panel. I mean, he had every corner, everything dinged. But he did finish the race.
The going was tougher at the Busch Series level. And after one full season with Spencer in 1998, BR split the following year between just a handful of Busch races and a little more than half of the ARCA schedule. It was as if someone had turned on a light switch in ARCA. Little B recorded top 5 finishes in 7 of his 12 starts that year, including 2 wins. The first of those came on July 25th at Toledo Speedway in Ohio. Another victory followed just 3 races later at Pocono. Those results helped earn Alexander another shot at the Busch Series in the year 2000, this time with big money car owner Felix Sabates. Sabates had made a name for himself in the sport fielding cars for Kyle Petty and was continuing to do so in 2000 for Sterling Marlin and Kenny Irwin. The Alexanders became fast friends with Irwin, who appeared at a charity event they were hosting in Pennsylvania. On the way back to the airport, the party stopped to pick up some liquid refreshment for the flight home. And then this happened.
They walked in this bar. Kenny gets in between 2 other guys at the bar, and he steps up and the bartender says, "Yes, sir." And he says, "No, just give me a 12-pack here or 6-pack of, Budweiser, and that's all I need." And the guy sitting on the bench bumps Kenny. He says, "Hey." He says, "Yeah." He said, "I recognize you." He says, and Kenny's real proud, I said, "Yeah. And the guy says, yeah. He says, "You're a race car driver, aren't you?" Mm-hmm. He said, "Kenny, yeah, I am. Yep." And the guy says, "You're Blaise Alexander, aren't you?" The guys who were with him never left him forget that one.
Not long afterward, Irwin was gone. At the funeral a few days later, Sabates remembered seeing Alexander devastated, his eyes red from crying, a piercing look that remained on the flight back to North Carolina. It was more than Blaise Sr. could take. He went to his son and tried to get him to reconsider a career behind the wheel.
And I went to Blaise and I tried to talk Blaise out of it. I mean, my darndest, I said, "I'll give you the Chevrolet garage where we all grew up. And I'm a dealer 40 years now in this town." And I said, "I'll give you that dealership and you can run it." And he just wasn't leaving Charlotte. That's where his friends were. That's where that's where he made his new life. And I understood that.
Alexander started the 2001 Busch Series season with a team fielded by Armando Fitz, Sabates' son-in-law. But after just 4 races, the team shut down due to a lack of sponsorship. Again, Alexander found a home in the ARCA division. Splitting time between owners Joe Falk and what amounted to a rent-a-ride deal with ARCA veteran Bob Shack, Alexander sat on the pole at Watkins Glen and was going after the top spot on the next-to-last lap when he developed engine trouble. He stayed on the track, got caught up in a scramble for the win, and wound up credited with a second-place finish. Alexander won the next race on the ARCA schedule, this one at Michigan. He then finished second at Pocono. Things were going extraordinarily well. Busch Series team owner Dave Carroll had landed sponsorship for Alexander to return to the division. Members of the team had pitted Alexander that summer and did so again that fall at Charlotte. With less than 5 laps to go, Blaise Alexander Jr. ducked under Kerry Earnhardt, Dale's look-alike son, as they raced for the lead coming off turn 4. They hooked bumpers, snapping Alexander hard into the outside retaining wall and Earnhardt onto his roof. Earnhardt got quickly out of his car, but Alexander did not. Rather than withdrawing the red flag and racing to the checkered, ARCA officials called the event complete at that point. Earnhardt was credited with the victory. Alexander was second place. Little B didn't make it. His passing was announced on Speed Vision's broadcast of the event, just before it signed off. Again, Alexander was not wearing any sort of restraint device at the time of his accident. Hindsight was, is, and always will be a perfect 20/20.
I often wondered why we absolutely just didn't make it mandatory for him. And again, I wasn't very involved in the team. Probably should have been more involved. And again, the team was young, but he should have been wearing one. It wasn't mandatory at the time. It wasn't. But I don't know. He should have been wearing one. I don't remember much discussion about it, though. It wasn't being pushed either. I didn't understand that. But maybe I wasn't aware of it. I should have been paying closer attention.
Most in the Winston Cup garage were already using either a HANS or Hutchins device when NASCAR announced on October 17th, less than 2 weeks after Alexander's accident, that drivers in all 3 of its national touring divisions would be required to do so. At about the same time, Blaise Sr. was watching a television news report that left him all the more troubled.
when Blaise died in 2001 in October, I think they were off the next week, if I'm not mistaken, and they were going to go to Talladega. And there were only a couple of guys that weren't wearing the HANS device in the Cup Series, and that was Tony Stewart, maybe, and Jimmy Spencer, maybe a few others. But anyway, after the funeral, I was back home, and I'm either watching TV or listening to something on the radio. I forget what it was, but they started talking about this HANS device, and they started talking about if Dale Earnhardt hadn't passed away in February at Daytona, they wouldn't be making the HANS device mandatory right now. Well, that really upset me, because had they made that HANS device mandatory in February, Blaise might have survived that accident in October.
In a conversation with then Charlotte Motor Speedway president Humpy Wheeler, Blaise Sr. had two requests. The first was this.
Dale Earnhardt has a great legacy. He was a whale of a racer. In fact, he was one of Blaise's all-time heroes. Even in high school, he wrote a big, long paper about Dale Earnhardt, which I still have. So it wasn't about, Dale Earnhardt needing a legacy. He had it. He won everything. He won all the championships. All I said to Humpy was, I said, now you're making these HANS devices mandatory. I said, that's Blaise's legacy. I said, you're doing this. You guys are doing this, 2-3 days after Blaise's passing, and you're talking about Dale Earnhardt. So you could see I was a little bit upset about it. And Humpy said, I can straighten that out for you, which I think he did a really good job, because I never heard much about that again. And again, not to take anything away from Dale Earnhardt, just to put the legacy where it belonged.
And the other?
If you can get them to install the soft walls on every major track, on every track that NASCAR runs. And I mean, I didn't care about them being in the pits and things like that. I mean, I just wanted them in the safety areas where they needed them. Coming out of turns, the straightaways, the corners, things like that. All the major walls have been covered now. They've done what they were supposed to do. I never did another thing. I never harassed the France family. I didn't go after Humpy in the track. I didn't do any of that. I did it because I didn't want to see any other family having to go through what we went through.
In the 25 years since Blaise Alexander Jr.'s fatal accident, not a single driver has been killed in any of NASCAR's top 3 national touring divisions. That is the legacy of the Firestorm 5. Adam Petty, Kenny Irwin, Tony Roper, Dale Earnhardt, and Blaise Alexander. Join us next time for the series finale of Firestorm 2000, 2001, the years that forever changed NASCAR, in which we'll take a look at the legacy of the 2 worst years in NASCAR history.